Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to my podcast. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that this podcast has a Patreon. Patreon is a membership platform that allows creators to develop a more sustainable source of financial support for their projects. My Patreon supports this podcast. If you find this podcast worthwhile, please consider becoming a patron by heading over to the Patreon link in the description. Thank you, and on with the show. You know, I'm a secret rapper too.
All right.
I don't tell people that.
I love that, but it's like, I don't have the skill for that. I got to focus on one part of my craft because I suck at everything else.
I feel like in my brain, my bars are dope. And then when I record them on my phone, it's white bread garbage shit.
Yeah. No, the same thing, because I do it in front of my wife. I'm like, okay, I'm going to rap. And then I wait for her reaction. She's always like, no words. She's like, no.
Not happening.
She goes, no. No. I'm like, all right, back to the drawing board. But I do it every month just to shake her up. So, but I don't think I'll ever, I don't think that's my wheelhouse. I'm not there.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll have Jan record me while I'm driving. Oh, I got this great verse.
Yeah.
And then I'll do it and send it privately via social media. And the only person who seems to like it is one of my cousins.
Yeah. He's into it, man. He knows art. I'm sure it's good. You should just put it on YouTube.
Spiritually, it's on point. The execution of it, though, is definitely not my strong suit.
I know. So things we love it, but we just can't do it.
Yeah. I accept it.
Yeah. The same here.
So you're a hustler, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
That's why you're on here.
I try to be, and
you're
so
making
are you.
moves. You're making moves.
Yeah.
Though.
Thank you. It's taken me, 20 plus years to get this far,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's what, for the acting game, it's what it takes. It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of hours. Like last night, 2 a.m. I was doing an audition. So it never sleeps, 24/7.
That's what a lot of people don't get is you just got to keep doing it. I once heard that what's his name? Ed Burns, who did the 90s Sundance movie, Brothers McMullen, said that he gave himself until the age of 35, and if he didn't make progress by the age of 35, he was going to stop. And I'm like, that doesn't make any goddamn sense to me whatsoever.
No, not at all, man. Because I started in 2001, right? Fresh out of college, went to LA, wasted 10 years of my life just fucking around. Like, I don't know. It was, I'm out in Hollywood, I'm going to make it. I didn't do shit. It was terrible. So the girl I was dating at the time, she's like, I got an offer to go back to Atlanta to live, and I was like, okay, well, I'm pretty much done with acting. I was like, oh, that sucks. And I had, at that time, 2011, 10 years later, I had no idea that Atlanta was booming, right? I was like,
recording in progress.
I had no idea that it was actually booming. So what I did, I was like, all right, I'll go back with you. We'll move to Atlanta, leave LA behind. Like I said, 10 years of I don't know, just personal training and nothing. Just drinking plenty of beer. Went back there, and for some reason, I was like, okay, I'm going to, she had a job. I was like, okay, I'm going to obviously look for a job to help support myself. But I happened to see this backstage at that time. I was like, I saw this little industrial, car company. We're looking for an actor to come in and talk about the cars. I'm like, well, shit, need something, right? So I was like, I applied for that. And then, I did a little, I had no idea what a self-tape was, right? I was like, that's new. I'm like, okay. So they're like, we need you to tape these lines. And I was like, oh God. So I used the cell phone. She held it for me against the black, like a blank wall, just recording my audition. And somehow I got lucky and I got that. So from that point, I used that footage, that job to get an agent. And then like 10 years later, here I am just booking small, again, I'm not like famous, but my goal is to be like most actors, just working, right? Just be a working actor. If you can support yourself, in my mind, you made it. So that helped me get an agent at that time. And then from there, I moved, to Virginia where I'm at now. But I've just been, like you said, I've been beating the streets and trying to make it work. So,
how often do you get up to New York?
Ooh, so I have her. I use my wife's family to work as a local. So I get up there probably every month. I booked the show there. Wow. Yeah, I booked the show there a month and a half ago. It's coming out from History Channel, Empires of Excess. And then I did a movie called Pan American with Eric Roberts in it. So, but I get up there, as much, that's my big market now because I'm, within driving distance, what's called a modified local. So anything that you can drive to within 500 miles, that's what you do, Back when I was in LA, when I started, it was all in the room. But now, you can work local or modified local. That's what you do. But yeah, it's changed a lot. But I get as soon as I can, I love to go to New York because that's where it's at. That's what's happening.
I consider Maine to DC local. That to me is just,
right. Yeah, easy drive.
Yeah, it's all like Route 95 all the way.
Yeah. Where's the scenic view? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you You showed me your whiteboard earlier.
Oh yeah. So this is my progress report. So basically since 2019 I became an actor that I want to say supporting myself, which is I live in a very cheap, low rent area, so it's not hard to support yourself here. But so you probably can't see the jobs I have, but what I do, I track everything. So for an example, on the left hand side is how many auditions I get per month. And then adjacent to that, I have do you book, how many jobs that I book basically. And then if you go across, it's just like how many jobs that I've actually filmed. So nice. It's just a way to keep track and let myself know that hey, you know what, it's working for you. You're doing something. So.
Yeah, that's the thing that when we met, and just for the sake of educating the audience on the backstory, you submitted to something I was casting, which didn't work out because the pandemic. But we kept in touch. And one of the things I noticed about you is, man, you're a hustler.
Well,
you're just working it. And that's the key that so many people don't get.
It's the drive.
The people starting out. And that's why we started out with, talking about that, is because it really just takes doing, no matter what. Just keep going. I mean, I'm 40, you're 46.
Yep.
Neither of us are by far A-list celebrities.
I'm more like a C-list.
Yeah.
They're like, are you?
And I'm like a Y-list filmmaker. Like,
I'm just trying. Basically, my job essentially is being a day player.
Yeah.
And it's the hardest job in the acting world. And any actors watching this is going to tell you the same thing. You just audition like crazy. You go to for a day role and a day play role, and then you just go to the next job. So you never really get time to settle into a big show, right? As a character, you're always switching sides. Book the role if you're fortunate. Next job. So that's the hardest thing about it. But you just can't, like I said, you know what? I get 4 auditions in one day. You just do them that day if you can, because the next day the same thing. You just keep hustling. You never let it get behind, basically.
How fast are you? So let's say you get a request for a videotape or a self-tape. How fast are you turning that around whenever you're getting a request?
This is going to sound crazy, but I do it within 24 hours because I'm fortunate. My wife is the reader, right? A lot of girls don't have like readers on the other side. They have to call in. It's very difficult, or go to someone that's $20 for an hour to read with them, basically, and videotape it. So yeah, fortunately I have that. So I do my best because this is all I do. So 24 hours, get it in. That's, I'm fortunate enough to have a couple agents, and that was one of my appeal is I don't have another job. This is okay. So this guy's not going to be working somewhere else. He can at least get his audition in fast enough. And if he books it, he can go hit it and get the jobs.
Do you think that that's part of why you work?
I think so. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm the most talented guy out there at all, but I'm saying it's just the availability. Yeah. And that's luck, right? Because I live in a certain area that's cheap, and my wife's a classical pianist, and it all works out. She's artistic director.
Let me tell you, one thing I've realized is talent has very little to do with success.
No.
It's availability and having the luck of being in the right place at the right time among the right people.
Yeah, sure.
What you just said, though, reminded me of this Night Court episode. Do you remember that show, Night Court? I feel like you're old enough to remember Night Court.
Believe me, I got the gray hair
here. Yeah. Well, somebody had asked the judge, and I might be misremembering this. I haven't watched it since I was a kid, but I remember somebody asking the judge, how on earth did a goofball like him become a judge? And he said that the call came in on a Sunday. All of all of the candidates they would have preferred were in the Hamptons or wherever.
Yep.
And he answered the phone. It was as simple as he was there to answer the phone. That's how he got the job. And that's all the impression I'm getting from you is if you're there to answer the phone, you're more likely to get the job.
There's no question, because that's a lot of it. It's like that's the number one thing as an agent. They're working hard. They're hustling to get the right clients submitted, their packages. And all of a sudden, I booked a job. They're like, I'll do the audition, but you're not available to do it, right? So it's a lot of that. And what's funny is I have another agent in the Midwest, and it's for a commercial coming out soon. It's for a lottery commercial. And I wasn't the number one choice. I was runner-up. So I found out. This is a couple of weeks ago. And so the guy that had booked the role couldn't do it for some reason. I don't know what it was. And then they called me on a Monday. I'm watching Monday Night Football. And they're like, hey, can you be here on Tuesday for a fitting? Because this happened. I'm like, sure. And that's it. I mean, but obviously, you know what? Not everybody can do that. They have a regular job, but I mean, that opens the doors for me to be able to just do whatever I want to do in that business, to always be there, always be available. And that's, like you said, that's a lot of it.
How old were you when you finally left LA?
Okay. So I went there, I was 35. I left LA because I went to LA when I was 25. I took the long route in college. I didn't graduate until I was 25. So, and I left, since I left Virginia, Radford University, I moved straight to LA, and then it was 10 years out there. So, like I said, I really had no intention of staying in. I just had to find something as soon as I got there, like to make a little bit of money. And that's what appealed me to that industrial. And then all of a sudden I was like, and then I found out through the agent I got within a month of being there. I was like, oh my God, dude, Atlanta's booming. And then I did my first audition for her, and I still didn't have a tripod, right? Because, when I'm in LA, you just go to the room, you read, you're out. You don't tape your stuff. And so I did that. And then her first advice to me is like, number one thing is you need to get a tripod, because the video was like shaky. But honestly, at 35, most people are looking for, I don't want to say a real job, but they give up on their dreams. And I just, really, I thought I was at that point, but I knew that that's something I could probably book and get back into, and just to make some money at the time. And it opened it up. I mean, and I haven't looked back, and I was, like I said, once I came back to my hometown in Virginia, I was able to just do this since 2019 full time. I've been fortunate. And I can't say there's been, there's luck, availability, so many. I mean, it's not merit based. This whole thing with acting, it's not. You can't like, oh yeah, we're just going to work hard and get in. No, there's too many elements. No, at all. It's like there's so many. Does he have the right look? What's going on here? I mean, yeah. I mean, it's impossible. I mean, I don't.
I mean, working hard is sort of the baseline, obvious thing everybody should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you're trying to do with your life. But none of that other stuff will matter if you're not working hard. So you might get lucky and meet the person who's casting. But if you haven't been working on your craft, if you haven't been doing things, other things, like all the pieces have to kind of fall into the right place. And it takes an enormous mental stamina to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. Even at this point for me right now, I'm thinking to myself, you know what, this year I'm looking at my board and I filmed 10 parts, but I've probably booked around 15. And that's great, right? But I still feel this sense of like, man, I'm not doing enough because I'm at, I was telling my wife this, I'm at a certain level, right? But I keep booking things on the same level. How do I make that next leap?
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. So again, I'm just trying to secure myself as a working actor. Being famous or doing this, making a lot of money, I don't know that
never should be the goal.
That's not going to be great, right?
That never should be the goal.
Yeah, I love it's changed, but it's changed for me because out of college, I'm like, oh God, I'd love to be famous. And then a few years later, I was like, oh, I want to make a bunch of money. But now I do it for me. It is the craft, right? It's funny how that changes because it becomes like this is my release. This is my outlet. This is making art. I don't want to say heals me, but it allows me to be me.
Yeah.
And nowhere else can I do that.
Well, I mean, that's sort of been kind of my trajectory mentally as well. Is I started out wanting to do stupid comedies, maybe with a tinge of a tongue-in-cheek, wittiness. But for the most part, it was comedy, and then it was dumb action, leaning towards the patriotic. But then I moved to New York, and I slowly became really philosophical about everything. I started detaching myself from the cultural bubble I'd been brought up in and started seeing how powerful this medium is that we both work in and what really could be done if we weren't influenced by this drive to make as much money as possible. And I ended up going back to school in my mid-30s. That's when I got my BA and my MFA back to back. I was in my 30s, bro.
How do you actually know that? Oh.
Yeah,
That's a lot,
I have to start paying it off in January. But
you gotta defer, forbearance and defer.
Yeah, well, I've been there. They're getting tired of that. But
right.
Once I went through my 30s, that's when a lot of the work that was most meaningful to me really started coming out, starting with Death and Life, which is a film most people won't watch, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Highly philosophical.
That was your film. That's what.
It was my film, and I would have never been able to make it without that journey. And then Fractals, which you auditioned for.
Yeah.
And
which is a great film, by the way.
Thank you.
I mean, with the trailer, I love, so not out yet, I don't think, right?
No, next year. Yeah. Whatever happens, it'll be out next year. Yeah. But then also we're going to be collaborating on some projects.
Sure.
And the first one that I'm still writing for you was meant to just be a tongue-in-cheek monster movie, but I'm not happy with tongue-in-cheek. So it starts taking longer because I'm developing it and integrating, making it more meaningful to me. I'm integrating all of these philosophical ideas about, well, what makes a monster? Yeah. That's the question that I'm asking myself as I'm writing this monster movie that's just supposed to be fun. Yeah. I want to know, why is something horrific? Yeah. Why is something scary?
Sure. Yeah.
And what does that mean for the monster? And so if you're wondering what the status of that monster movie is, it's me trying to negotiate around these philosophical questions. Yes.
Yeah, it's great. We put a lot of layers and elements.
Yeah. And so, man, I would have never, ever taken this long to develop anything in my 20s. Are you kidding?
Sure. Commercial, right?
It was all about commercialism.
Yeah.
And also making a monster movie would have been, if I had made it in my late teens, early 20s, it would have been about making a goofball movie.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. Evil Dead or whatever.
Right.
I don't know if you ever saw that.
I did.
Oh, yeah. We just watched it for the first time. Like,
oh, wow.
In October. I never watched them. They're really weird.
Yeah. they were out, for that time, they were out.
Yeah.
Full following, so.
But I don't know. Yeah, I love this idea, though. If you stick with it, you'll never know what kind of projects you'll end up doing. Or
and that's
how
it. You
your
have to be willing
outlook
to
will be.
work.
Yeah.
Work hard, stick with it, whatever at this, like you said, in your 30s, 40s, you realize you want to work on projects that are meaningful to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what keeps you going, right? You couldn't sustain this whole thing. You couldn't, in your 20s, had the same type of like mentality. You wouldn't be around right now. You would be working a corporate job somewhere. I don't know, doing something, but it's impossible.
I mean, if your end game is to have a house in the Hollywood Hills or a penthouse on the Upper West Side, fuck you. Forget about it. You're not gonna.
No, man.
You'll never get in there.
No, I live on a mountaintop in Virginia. It's got 500 people, and I'm just like, and it's funny. It's funny because the people in this town that I know that I go to, like my wife plays a concert and we'll talk and like, oh, you're an actor. Oh, well, how? You're in Virginia. They don't realize you can self-tape down here and then travel to the next job. I mean, It's all changed, but like, my goal is just support. Like I said, like, Hollywood Hills, that's not, if it does happen, it's great, but realistically, it's not going to happen. I mean, that's just something that you have to be happy with what you're doing at the time.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, that's what I wanted. When I was in high school, I thought it was going to be Hollywood. Then I went to film school on the West Coast, and I'm like, what? F the West Coast. Then when I went back to Maine after film school, 9/11 happened. And there was a big exodus of the film industry after 9/11. And I'm like, that might be my ingress. Because I'd never considered New York seriously. And I wouldn't mind learning how to make films in an urban environment. So I moved to New York based on that. I had no job offers. I wasn't enrolled in a class. I saved up some money over the 3 months of a summer shift at a restaurant and moved
you
here.
memorized the subway system.
I memorized the subway system over the course of the preceding year. Yes, you remember that story. I visited New York twice before moving here. And the first time I took a map from the MTA, because they give away free maps of the subway, and I hung it on my bedroom wall. I took down all the movie posters, all the artwork, and I only had that up. And every day I would just I don't have a photographic memory, but I would just like stare at it, blink my eyes real quick, because if you blink your eyes, you can kind of remember patterns. It's a weird thing.
It's just like light, right? When you blink your eye, you see a certain image.
Yeah. And if I can just sear that into my brain. Yeah. By the time I moved to New York of Labor Day weekend of 2003, man, I was getting around. No question about it. There's only a couple of times where I got a little frazzled because it was a weekend, and on the weekends they fuck everything up. But that was the only learning curve. But
when I first moved to LA, they had what's called a Thomas guide. It's a big map. You had to memorize that. So, I think at that time Garmin was just coming out with their navigation system, but it sucked. So you still had the book. You had to memorize where to go. So that's why, navigation didn't matter. When navigation came out with the phone, I already had it all memorized in LA. But when I came to New York, first time meeting you, I was taking Uber because like, shit, I don't want to get lost. And you're like, dude, what are you doing? You got to memorize the subway system. Come on, man. If you're going to work up here, you got to know where to go. And I thought, you know what? That's true. So I'm still haven't memorized it, but I'm going to be working on it. So, but it was a good advice.
The best mechanism I found was to think about it in terms of its organic growth. So like the first subway system was what they called it the IRT line. And became the one train, and that's on the west side, and it goes basically under Broadway for the most part. And it's just like the lower tip of Manhattan, the Battery, all the way to the top on the west side. That's the one. And then you just count from there, like, okay, then they built this next, and then there's also some trains out in Queens that were privately owned for a while. Like, I learned the story, and then
I'm going to say that's like,
they're all still there, all those trains.
Right. Wow.
They're just all owned by the public now. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I became obsessed with just getting here and digging my heels in. I did have a bit of a misconception about the film community because all of my education is in the early 90s all the way back to the 60s when people
Early
were
90s.
legitimately a
Yes.
community. By the time I
Oh, yeah.
moved here, it was not as communal as I was
No.
hoping. So
I think in the '90s, was DV out yet? Was it SD or was it just DV? Did DV come?
in the
Before
early 90s, they were still shooting 16 millimeter film.
Yeah. Okay.
When I started, I only got to shoot film at film school. So all my stuff has always been on either mini DV
Yeah. Sure.
or Super 8 or eventually HD and above. But it's
I remember the first ever film I tried to make. I don't think I even told you this was in 2005. It was when DV it came out as the mini tapes. And I had the Panasonic HVX 100. It was just the first 24p kind of handheld thing, and I wrote kind of like a completely no dialogue film in a sense, and ended up being, after watching all the footage in hours and hours, it ended up being like 10 minutes of worthy footage. But I gained a lot of experience. But DV was a big jump when from 16 to 8. You had to worry about taking the processing room. I was like, maybe I can do something myself. But that was, high ambitions with no plan, basically. In LA, I'm not sure what it was. I always thought I could just kind of skate through it and do this, do that. But without hard work and dedication, you got to be the hardest working person out there to even compete.
yeah.
To make it the next level, it takes a lot of other elements. But to get in that working realm, you have to be, die hard and working hard all the time. So.
Yeah, it's so true because one, the people who are automatically getting offers,
Yeah.
the people who have the means of production already, they already have it. They were born into it.
That's what I'm saying. That's
Nepotism is a very real problem. And when I came here, I didn't really believe that. But I learned really quickly that you have to almost be a gnat buzzing around their ears to get their attention. And it sounds mean and it sounds like
but it's
almost negative. It is, but it's absolute truth. Bug the shit out of them until they're willing to collaborate with you, until they're willing to hire you, until they're willing to work with you. And if they're not willing to work with you, make something better than what they can produce.
I think that's what it is, man. Because everybody has that ability, to make something. If they're passionate about it, they can find the right people to help them. But it's the vision, the dream, and it takes a lot of work and dedication to make a movie, complete a film. I don't want to say it's impossible, but to make one that's worth watching is nearly impossible.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And I mean, Fractals, the first footage of that was shot in 2017.
Wow.
And
okay,
then,
so I think I talked to you in 2019, right? Or was it early 2019?
It was probably late 2019.
Okay, late. Okay.
Because we ended up shooting it in July of 2020.
July. Okay. Wow, that was you've been at it for a while.
Been at it a while, and the thing is though is it wasn't always like that.
No.
I used to turn movies around in the same day. I had these short films that have won awards where I shot it one over the course of 2 hours. And in the moment, that's gratifying, but in the long run, it's a less meaningful project. I like taking my time and feeling things.
Telling your stories.
Like the thing we're developing now, not the monster movie, but the other thing that we'll mention at some other point. I'm taking my time outlining a sort of different approach so that we can also take the, whatever time we are going to spend making this thing, we're able to experiment and feel the way through it that I wouldn't have done 20 years ago.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I wouldn't have even had the patience to do what I do now.
I do think that has a lot as you get older, and I didn't think this was possible because I didn't think I'd be getting 46, but you do, I don't know, a certain amount of patience. Like, it's quality over quantity, right? So it's all about what you can produce that's meaningful, not only to everybody else, but to you, as we say.
It's also the experience, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of stressful shoots that I don't enjoy. I
Yeah.
don't care how good the footage is.
Yeah. That's
If I'm
true.
not
That's a good
having
point.
fun, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And that's something that changed for me in my early 30s. I had this disastrous shoot. I don't know if I ever told you about it. It was the
I think
only,
you may have mentioned that
yeah,
you were hired on a commercial shoot or movie, and then
it was a, well, I mean, it started out with as a bad business deal
yeah, yeah,
that
I
just
don't
kind
know.
of went down the
Yeah,
fucking drain. It was the only SAG after film I ever directed.
yeah. During
And
that, I'm sure that was pretty tough. They have new
yeah,
laws now.
that was sort of the cherry on top of all the bullshit. But the thing is it made me realize, and this was the thing that came out of it, was one, no movie's worth putting up with the level of bullshit
No.
that I had to put up with on that. No, one, I never worked with a cinematographer again. After that, I shot all my own
Your own
stuff.
stuff.
I
Yeah.
learned the best ways to capture audio without the need for a sound guy. And let me tell you, my sound mixer, who did the final mix of fractals on this
No,
last
yeah.
project, he said
That's
this was
great.
one of the best recorded films he's ever mixed. I said, yeah, and I didn't
It's
even
all
have
you.
an on-set guy for that. It was all me and my girlfriend figuring out where to place mics without a boom. So we don't have a boom in our usual setup. We have a shotgun mic on the camera, and then we have another
Oh, wow.
identical shotgun mic that floats, and
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
way better
Yeah.
than what I got when we had a full crew, which is like really weird because you wouldn't think
Yeah.
that. You'd think that the tried and true way would be the best way. But there was something about the setup of that production. It enlightened me to this idea. Well, if I'm going to put all this effort into a screenplay, into putting all these, I'm not going to say my ideas are worth anything because most ideas aren't worth a goddamn. But there's a lot of energy getting put into creating something that works, that everybody can benefit from.
There you go.
And there's almost a feeling of disrespect when it just becomes about the ego of the individual.
Yeah.
Worst crew I ever had. The cast was a split mix between people who understood what I was trying to do and people who just weren't down for it. They
Do
were
you feel
just
like the
happy that
DP?
they got hired. That was about it. They wanted to
Do you
brag
feel
that
like
they got hired.
right? Do you feel like the DP, for an example, didn't have your vision, or just someone that completely just, or was it too competitive?
He was very talented, and
Yeah.
he invented some amazing ways to light without using professional lights.
Which is always good.
But he couldn't work without people on his team that I just couldn't. They didn't have the right spirit. They kind of, I almost felt like their complaining corrupted him a little bit. And
Yeah.
by day 3, the whole thing was just, I didn't want to go
Right.
back.
Yeah.
And I now don't use a crew. Like,
Well, from my
that's
experience,
shocking to a lot of people.
no, it makes sense because all the sets that I've been on, the movies that have worked, you always hear them say this at the end. It was a family, right? So it's all like they're great friends after. If that doesn't happen, you're not going to get a great product. I mean, they have to like each other. Everyone has to work together, and it has to be the same vision. Everyone, and the director has to like helm the ship. And that's
Yeah.
the way it works. I mean, if you're not on the same page, you're not going to make anything that works.
I agree 100%. And that's the thing that was the project that made me realize that is I'd rather not have a crew than to have the wrong crew.
Yeah,
So
this is good.
I took a break. I went back to school. I didn't make a film for a number of years. And then in between my undergrad and my graduate, that summer I made Death in Life. And that changed. That changed who I was as a filmmaker. Death in Life is pure art house. I'd applaud anybody who can get through the first 10 minutes. Because I deliberately engineered it to weed out people who wouldn't understand it. I'm not kidding. The first 10 minutes is a shot of a parking garage with people walking underneath, back and forth.
Oh man, I don't know if my dad would have made it because that's kind of how I got into filmmaking. Right?
Most people wouldn't
Like,
make it.
Yeah, he's like, if somebody's not getting beat up in 5 minutes, he's not watching the movie.
The version of me prior to that disastrous project wouldn't have made it.
Yeah,
I would have walked out, and that's what's so important here.
Yeah,
is that now my brain had shifted to a point where I'm comfortable presenting this shot for 10 minutes with a little bit of voiceover, a really deep headache-inducing droning sound.
Yes.
To get you into this vibe that, oh, I'm in for something really fucking weird.
Yeah.
But if you can get through the first 10 minutes, you can make it the rest of it. It's only an hour and 6 minutes, an hour and 3 minutes or whatever.
No,
but if you can get through the first 10, you can get through the rest of it.
I do like the setup. You know, weed them out. Who made it? 50 that made it. You're going to get this treat. You love it.
But at Jan's request on the next one, which was Fractals, she asked me to take it easy. So I said, all right, I'll make it a little bit lighter tone. So instead of having a parking garage, I start Fractals out at the back window of a train, and we're just kind of going through a train tunnel.
Which is more, I get it.
It's a little more interesting, and there's music too now, and it's nice music. But it's still the same thing. Like if you can get through the first, also cut it down, so it's like 3 minutes. If you can get the first 3 minutes, you're on your way. But then
you're getting closer for the modern day attention span, right?
Yeah,
3 minutes is closer, right?
A lot of this too is these last two projects were very much an experiment in fucking with people's attention spans because honestly, like the American movie-going public has been corrupted. They've been corrupted. They don't know how to sit in a real film.
It's true. YouTube, right? It's like everything's quick.
Boom. Everything's snappy. Everything has to happen fast.
Quick cut, jump cuts. You know. Now you're right.
You know, the biggest complaint with Avengers Endgame that I heard from people were that it took too long to get to the portal scene. And I'm like, that was all the stuff before the portal scene is the best stuff. Yeah. Probably some of the best stuff over 10 years. Like the portal scene is a nice button on the end of it, but
you'll see some writer in the back room going, "You son of a bitch."
Yeah. So I don't know. I something about fucking with that. That also came out of that experience.
I didn't know that. I like that. Yeah, it's like you know what you just like. Can you hold on? You know, I like it.
But I'm out of that phase now. I did it. I did 2 films where I got to experiment with that. And one's out there now. The other one will be out there in 2022.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna make something completely different.
Yeah. Oh man, cannot wait.
Yeah. We can't tell most of you guys about it yet, but we will someday.
Soon enough, but not yet. Yeah.
And that's exciting.
It's gonna be good.
It is. But yeah, I really wanted to do this episode with you.
Well, thank you.
I invited you off the cuff because I'm like, well, I need some stuff for December. But then as I got to thinking about it this week, I'm like, we could make this episode about the hustle.
Yeah.
I haven't really had a solid one about that, and it's such an important subject to me.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter whether the listener. If you're out there, if you're listening, if you're digesting this through YouTube or some podcast app, it doesn't matter if you're an actor, if you want to be a filmmaker, if you want to be a writer, all these hard to get into industries, all these fields where the ingress seems corrupted by nepotism. It's all about the hustle, man. It's not just hard work. You know what? I grew up with some of the hardest working motherfuckers on the Maine coast. Lobstermen, fishermen, carpenters. Yeah. They work their asses off. They're the hardest working people I've ever met. But you know what? They're still paying off debts. They're still paying bills. Because hard work is only the baseline component. What we're talking about is everything else and negotiating around everything above that. Yeah. That's the hard stuff.
Sure. To get to that level, it takes that extreme dedication of being a hard worker.
God, yes.
But then once you're there, like what I'm doing right now is like Is he, again, I'm going to all the other intangible parts. Does he have the right look? I mean, where's he located? Things that you can't control. It's like the only thing you really can control is the amount of hustle you put into it. That's what you can control.
That's a great.
And if you're not doing that, I mean, you're not going to. It's not in our business. It's not possible to get to that hopeful level. Like, you know, just get to that level to where they can kind of see you. Takes extreme dedication. That's it.
That's the perfect, like, quote. I think that's going to be the title of this. The only thing you can control is the amount of hustle you put into it.
That's it.
I love that.
That's all you have. That's your only bit. I mean,
this is why we get along, bro.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I tell myself every day is like, it's a T-shirt I saw many years ago. I don't even know where it was. Can't knock the hustle. You probably know this whole thing. There's a T-shirt printed, but I always remember that, like, you know, like, and then, you know, if I don't put 100% in, there's no way I can get to that next level. And that's my whole thinking now is, how do I jump? And I said this several times today, but if we don't do the hustle, you're not going to get to that next level. To be noticed, 100% effort to hopefully get to the next level. That's the goal. That's what I'm presenting. So.
You know what I also like is that you're willing to just make a project.
Yeah, no, anything.
Like, one of the things I'm always telling actors and actresses that come through my orbit is, in addition to having that list of auditions, having that list of things you've booked, where's that list of projects you're putting together for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Because you are in control of that, right?
That's the one thing. If more than getting hired, you are 100% in control of whether or not you hire yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And then, as they always say, the hustle amount goes to 200% because you're acting and producing. I did it, you know, recently I did a short film like that. And it's the first time in quite a while I put that together. And man, the amount of effort it takes just to do something like that, it's 24/7 to get everything together. There's no time. I mean, you obviously know this, but I mean, it just takes man, people don't, oh yeah, I watched your 20-minute short. It wasn't bad. I like it. It's okay. They have no idea how many hours you put in. I had a family member up recently and they were looking at my board like, oh wow, you did 25 auditions this month. You only booked 2. That's kind of low odds. I'm like, really? Actually,
those are pretty
phenomenal odds. But see, in the different world, that looks terrible, right? You're booking 10% roughly. So it's like, you know, that looks bad. So, but the reality of our world, you're making
great
it.
Odds. Yeah.
You know, 1 out of 10, right? That's it.
People don't realize that this isn't like putting your application at the GM and getting a factory line, processing job. This is one of those industries where if you really make it, not only are you set for life, but your next of kin is set for life, and so are theirs. And just because of that alone, you're in for the hardest hustle possible. Yeah. So it's important not to just look at it as something you're getting hired to do, but, and this word isn't thrown around enough for this, you have to be an entrepreneur. Yeah. You have to look at yourself as an entrepreneur. Every actor who's ever achieved anything is an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
absolutely. There's a reason why, like, all these A-listers have their own production companies. They're creating vehicles for themselves because they know that that's really the best way they're going to get the best results for what they're capable of.
That's just it. And the other thing is, as an actor, you don't give up on an audition, right? So for example, I auditioned for a movie in October, and then I booked it in May. So like you just gotta do the work, hustle hard, put the time in, and then just let it go from there. But it will come back to you if it's worth it. I mean, all jobs are worth putting the time and effort into that audition. I mean, you have to. Oh yeah. You can't just throw one up. You have to put your time and effort in. Go to the next one, but you have to get them done. You can't, and also you can't never turn one down. That's the biggest mistake a lot of actors make. That I've noticed, like, oh, I don't have time for that. I always make time. If it's 3 a.m., 2 a.m.,
there's plenty of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what do you really want to do with your life that you don't have time?
Right? Why are you in this business? Right? That's what separates. As one person said, it's the hardest working person in the room. Always make it work.
I like this idea of, oh, what do you do for a living? I audition for a living. Sometimes they let me play. You know,
right. That's my job as an actor. Right? Two things, right? I like to say, stay in shape, right, the best you can. Get your vanity muscles working, be good. But also, your true primary job is auditioning. That's it. That's my job.
you know, the staying in shape part, not just for the sake of visuals, which, I mean, all the most well-paid actors are, let's face it, they're hot. But here's the thing. A lot of people don't realize how much energy they're going to need when they do make it. Not just actors, but entrepreneurs in general. It's so important. This is advice I got when I was in my late 20s. I was going to these entrepreneur meetings. And the first piece of advice that I was given was stay in shape. I didn't really take it. I'm a fat fuck. But because once you do make it, you're going to need all that health and energy to keep up. Because getting through the barrier is just the first part. Then you're going to maintain it. Yeah. And that takes an enormous amount of stamina. Enormous amount.
It does. I mean, and again, I go back to this again. It's like making that next leap. You can control one element of an acting career, right? And then if you get to that, what you can control, it's just trying to stay there, like you just said, and then hopefully other things will happen. But but being there, staying in shape, everything mentally, physically, it's just, I mean, it's a daily grind. I mean, it's an amazing, and obviously there's a lot of ups and downs. I mean, you know, I'm like anybody else, like, you know, you haven't booked in 3 weeks, you know, what's going on? You reevaluate your headshots, are you doing something wrong in your auditions? You know, it's an up and down battle. It's not never glamour. I mean, honestly, I was like, oh, you're lucky. I saw you on, you know, the Hallmark or a Lifetime movie last year. Oh, that was great. You must be rich. I'm like, shit, man. I didn't get paid anything for that. You know, I'm the brokest actor you're ever going to see. You know what I mean? Like I mean, I'm at the level of being seen a little bit, but making money, it's like just to survive. That's it. And if you're in it for that, it's going to be nearly, if you don't have, like you just said, if you're not like a cousin of somebody's famous or a nephew or I don't know, brother or sister, and you're trying to make it, it's going to take a long time. But you can do it. I'm not saying that. It just takes time and effort, persistence, and you can't give up. I mean, but if somebody asked me recently, oh, would you recommend, you know, being an actor? I'm like, well, that's kind of tricky. I mean, on one hand, unless you can't live without it, I would say, you know, don't do it. But if it's in you and it's all you think about, like, and I don't know if other actors have said this, but that's it. If you know in your heart that's what it is, you got to sacrifice everything to do it. I mean, that's the way it works.
I love that spirit too. It's like, because that's the true measurement of why does somebody want to do this.
Yeah.
If you can't live with
the money's not going to be there.
What's the point?
Yeah, until you make it to a certain level. I mean, you're going to take, like, you know, for example, I live in Virginia, and I drove to Minnesota to do that. That's like 20 hours during the snow just to do a 4-line movie because I knew it would be on a certain network, right? And I thought, you know, it's good. But it was just good for me. It was great. But it takes like that kind of dedication. It's resume builders, right? Small steps. And I mean, I hate to say you don't have to drive 20 hours to do a part, but if you're not willing to, you know, that's the big difference. That's what separates. Are you willing to stay up all night? Are you willing to drive X amount of hours? And what are you willing to put into it to make it? And that's, again, I can go back to any business you're talking about. You can apply to anything, corporate world. It's the dedication, the hustle. And I'm not saying I'm the best out there, but I do all that I can do personally. You know?
Yeah. And that applies to everything.
Yeah.
That philosophy applies to everything.
Sure.
What are you willing to drive 200 miles for?
That's a great title too. I do like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's true though. Are you willing to? I mean, some people. Even I remember I drove to Atlanta for a commercial 2 years ago, and everybody was local but me, right? So I'm like 8 hours away, and they're like, "You drove all this way for this?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, and I'll do it again." Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, no, people. I mean, again, they stay in their pool. My pool is the U.S.
You're all over the place.
It sounds crazy, right?
It's
But if
not
the
though.
job was in Seattle, the job was in like Maryland, or it could be down in
Honestly,
Florida, I'm going to go where the job's at.
I think Hollywood is more on the path to being.
Yeah, it's where the grip truck is, right?
It's
It's where
not
the crew is.
centrally located anymore.
No,
It's everywhere, and
tax incentives, number one.
I mean that's a big part of the motivation for places like Atlanta getting all that business. But more and more people are sick and tired of almost. I would like to think, there's almost a cultural poison to being in one place.
Yeah,
It
I
negatively
agree.
affects the work. Like I can
Yeah.
watch a TV show or film and tell whether or not the screenwriter is based out of LA. Because there's almost always a conversation about movies. Oh, the main character they just love classic films.
Yeah.
That's because
Or
the
she's an
screenwriter is
actor.
in LA and he doesn't get around much. Like I can always tell when a screenwriter is based out of New York because there'll be a lot more political or bureaucratic level of dialogue. And then I could tell when a screenwriter isn't centrally located in either of these cities. And it really affects the work. And a lot of people just like, oh, you have no idea what you're talking about. I can look up
I
any of
know
these
it.
people
I've
that
never
I'm
actually
thinking
thought
of
of it.
and tell you where they live, like just based
Yeah.
on the quality of their writing, or not so much the quality, but the content of their writing.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that Hollywood continue this trend of sort of not just getting actors from all over who are willing to travel, but getting talent from all over who are willing to
Yeah.
contribute.
Because they
I'd
bring
rather,
that element to the movie. They bring their own element from their region, their area to that set.
yeah.
And that
I
means a
mean,
lot.
I write so many projects that are set in New England. The only reason I
Yeah.
haven't made them is because one, I don't really have that many connections up there anymore. I know that if I did, I would want local talent. I would want my scripts, if I had to hire writers to clean up some of the scenes, which is a normal part of the
Yeah, sure.
process. I'd want somebody local who can almost localize the stuff, like because I don't write for Maine local anymore. Like I
Yeah.
lived in Maine almost 20 years ago. I
Yeah.
would want somebody who's been there this whole time to be
Yeah.
like, all right, well maybe you should say this, or have you tried doing this? It's that kind of stuff I'm more interested in, and the same thing with actors.
That's the
I'd
advantage of
rather
having
have
a
New England based actors in
Yeah,
a
sure.
project that's set in New England, or if I'm doing something down south, have somebody maybe who's more familiar with the South. Like I would never have. I I think one of the most famous movies, Gone with the Wind, the people weren't even from there, and it
No.
was so obvious, and it comes off so
But
almost like a Broadway play. It's so
funny
ridiculous.
is my wife and I watched the show recently, and I won't name the show. It was based in Texas, and only one person had a southern accent. I was like, and I'm from the South, right? I live in Southern Virginia. We get it. And I'm like, I don't hear anything, and it's all like mainstream or northern accents. I was like, well, this is set in Texas. I had to look it up to make sure, and she's like, well, yeah, it is. I'm like, okay, wow, and then it was. But yeah, they did get it renewed. There's a couple problems too with continuity stuff, but that obviously that's a big thing. If you don't have certain actors that bring down intensity and that being authentic to that area,
Authenticity, yeah.
they can't do it. I mean, you can't really relate to a show that it's not honest to itself, I guess.
Yeah.
Not that I'm the expert out here, but I'm just saying that's for my opinion. For what I like, that's what you like to hear.
Yeah, and I had a similar conversation about this a couple podcasts ago with my sound mixer for Fractals.
Yeah.
He also did some visual effects stuff, but we were talking about that British actor who was in a couple movies recently where he had to put on a southern drawl. The guy who played James Bond. Remember him?
Yeah, no, I know exactly who it is. God,
I forget his name, but he's been in the press recently. But yeah, he's been in
Oh
like
my
a
God,
couple
that's terrible.
movies where he had to put on and to me though, like you know how many American actors could easily do those roles
Oh yeah,
and
simple.
sound more.
I know which movie you're talking about. He was in prison, right?
There was
Movie
that one,
part of-
and then there was also one where he played like a private investigator of a murder.
God, what's his? It's gonna bother me. What's his name?
Daniel Craig.
Daniel Craig.
Yeah. So yeah, the first movie was like they were robbing
Which I
a
think he's
race
uber
car
talented.
track or something. Yeah.
The guy's
had
got great
like,
chops and great talent. He's super talented, man. Like,
He's
if I could have a
talented.
quarter of his career, just give me an eighth of his career. I'll take it. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, you know what? But I get what you're saying. Like, if you can cast somebody from that area that actually they don't have to work for the accent, they can focus on the character. That's two elements. I mean, people don't realize that's extremely hard to focus on your dialogue and then fake an accent.
Yeah.
I mean, that separates. A lot of times you'll freeze up. You am I saying this correctly in this right accent versus the dialogue? You lose your place. And if you can alleviate one of those, that's going to be huge.
Yeah, I see it almost as like, where do you want to allocate your resources? I sure as shit don't want my actors allocating it towards a fake accent because no matter how good or practiced it is, it's still fake. No matter what.
I think Robert Downey Jr. said it the best. He's like, you know what? The hardest thing is, number one, I'm maybe quoting him, he said, the best out there is the writer. Then it's the director. And then it's the actor. He says, you give me somebody off the street, in 3 days, I can make them a star as an actor. You know what I mean? Like, so you can take somebody from that area that has a southern accent and you can, I don't want to say you can make him a star, but you can probably fit him into your movie, if they have the certain elements. But I mean, what he's saying is like, you know what? You don't have to stretch it. They're all there,
I agree with him. I weirdly agree with him. But then I get to thinking like, I mix up a lot of his arrogant roles with him because I don't know who's who because he's so good. But
I think that he was on that show, which I really like. I don't know his name. It's when it's in black and white, it's off the camera. It's if you've seen it on YouTube, it's a show that's all his shows shot in black and white. I think it's called Off the Camera, Off something. I'm not doing it very well, but anyway, he was on that show, and it's very like it's two chairs, and they're just having a real conversation. So I think that he really I think he was speaking the truth there on that. And again, I don't know. He's not doing like a press junket, normal one. So,
he's an interesting actor because his father is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time.
Yeah, I don't know much about his history other than him.
So he grew up. Well, I don't know if he grew up in Manhattan, but his dad was a New York filmmaker who made some really, really wonderful experimental films. Like he would do these incredible things. Like he would go out into New York City nightlife and interview swingers or people who were on the dating scene.
Yeah.
And then
you talking about his dad?
Yeah, his dad. In like the 60s. And then he would integrate those interviews with like made up scenarios. Yeah. And there was this one stunt he pulled where he dressed as a Yankee soldier, a Civil War era Yankee soldier who walked into Yankee Stadium during a baseball game. And he actually did this and he got arrested doing it. And then they smuggled the footage out and then they integrated it into a film. And
that's Borat style.
Borat, kind of an early version of that. Yeah. And
it could be the original piece.
You should look up a film called Putney Swope. It's a really weird movie.
Putney Swope?
Yeah, it should be on YouTube. If it's not on YouTube, it's definitely somewhere. Putney Swope is his father's sort of biggest movie that he made. It's weird. And do you remember that movie that Robert did where he plays an Australian who's playing a black guy?
Oh,
he's talking like
Thunder.
this.
Tropic Thunder, man.
Tropic Thunder. His voice for Tropic Thunder is from Putney Swope. See, Putney Swope, the main character is a black guy, but the whole voice is his father talking like this.
No shit.
It's alluding to his father's master work.
Like, I'm just a dude being a dude playing dude. Something
Yeah. So when you watch Putney Swope, you're going to see where this character from Tropic Thunder is rooted. Yeah.
Oh. That's not out in the press. I didn't know that. But I actually thought that's one of the best movies Ben Stiller has put together. Hands down.
Hands down. But everything that Well, that whole thing is a commentary on the film industry and how ridiculous it is. You know, the whole TiVo thing. It's like everybody, nobody's working. I'm not stepping foot on set until I have my TiVo.
Yeah.
That's such.
You know what? Tom Cruise was good at that too, man.
Yeah, he got it.
One of the best roles.
He understood exactly what the role was he was playing.
But I heard he had to fight for that because the Ben Stiller. This is guy. You know, if I'm wrong, let me know. But he's like, I want to be this certain character that dances and has all this arm hair, and he made his own character of it. I was like, man, that's what a vision he saw. He knew exactly
the big hands, like his hands had to be huge. Yeah,
that's what I thought. Man, Tom Cruise honestly just crushed that role. I was like, man, if you could just play that. I mean, I love him in all his roles. He's great, but I mean, that just separated it. I thought, wow.
Honestly, for all his real world crazy, Tom Cruise is one of the best actors.
Yeah, and his dedication to the craft, as we've been saying, stunts. Who can do that? Who can do what he does in Hollywood? If you can name one person who comes close to that, then you can't, because he is impossible.
You know how many pussy ass actors would not hang off the side of an airplane as it takes off? No one would fucking do that. I'd do that just for fun. He'd do that though in like 2 seconds.
No, man. I mean, he gets paid to do what he loves, man. That's what's crazy to me.
I don't know if this is true, but there was a rumor I'd heard that he's now trying to do a movie in space for real.
No, I heard that. Yeah,
you heard that too? Yeah. Fucking awesome.
I mean, it's Tom Cruise and everybody else, right? It's like the whole industry.
Yeah. This guy owns it.
I mean, yeah, he does. That's it right there.
He's
willing to do that's a dedication. That's seeing what your vision. That's your vision board, whatever you want to call it. He knows what he wants and he gets it.
Yeah.
Right. He knows what the viewers want. He can relate.
But he's also willing to take that risk, that leap, that one little thing in the film to make it stand out above.
To make it work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, 99% of the actors they're great at acting, but when it comes to everything else, they're not going to do it. And again, I'm not sure that I could hang off a plane or drop down to do my dialogue. He's off a plane. He's like flying off a plane out on the side of it, and then he's yelling something, right? I mean, he's like, oh, shit, get me off here, maybe.
If I ever have the option to offer that to you,
oh my God,
I
man.
will.
I will do it. We're gonna have him.
That was I heard horror stories about getting that shoot insured, though. The insurance companies didn't want that shit happen. But
didn't he break his ankle? Didn't he break his ankle on a jump?
I don't know.
Yeah, he was doing like kind of a scene. He jumped across a couple flights or jumped across to another building, and he made the jump, and then his foot broke. He didn't land it correctly. But
I mean, we're not designed to jump across buildings.
No, I mean, I'm thinking to myself, how do you?
But I think this mentality, though, it wouldn't have happened without Top Gun. I think it was born with Top Gun because the story I heard was he was going to reject Top Gun.
Oh, I haven't heard this.
The filmmaker, or Jerry Bruckheimer, whoever produced it, said, why don't you take a ride in a jet? We're going to put you with the Navy. They're going to take you for a ride.
Yeah.
And
I said Jerry. I was like, I know him. I was like, oh, yeah, it was Jerry. I know Jerry. I'm like, I know him.
We talk about these guys because we grew up with them. We grew up with their work.
Of course.
We grew up seeing their names in our household.
Yeah.
So, Jerry, this one's for you. Let us know if this story is true or not.
Yeah, sure.
The story I heard was that Jerry insisted that he go up with the Navy, so they took him up in a fighter jet.
In Top Gun, the original. Okay.
Yeah, before the original movie, and on touchdown, he got out and he said, "All right, I'm in," and that's it. And I think that was that experience that made him realize what his acting career can do for him. It's not just about acting now. It sort of becomes about getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
It does. What do you think about Keanu Reeves?
I love him.
Yeah,
he still rides the fucking subway, and he knows the subway.
Yeah, guy, he does know it, and I don't. I'm an Uber man and Lyft, but you know what? Coming soon is Subway. But anyway, I think he absolutely he embodies people give him shit on certain things, but man, to me he's amazing to watch. I think his ability, just not only as an action star, human being, humanitarian, whatever you want to say, but he embodies what it takes to be an actor.
Functioning.
I would say I put him in that same bubble, actually. You know what? I'm going to put Tom Cruise, Keanu Reeves, pretty close.
I think from an acting standpoint, they're equal.
Yeah.
I think from living life standpoint, they're equal.
Yeah.
But I think that Keanu has something more. There's something about the way he lives his life, at least from where I sit, the way I observe it, that has a lot more meaning to it. And I don't quite know what it is. I can't
it's that intangible thing that people separate stars, right? As an actor, you're like, you know, you can be the same level, same look, I don't know, same all these skills, but there's something intangibly that separates, that makes someone a star and someone not. And that's what you can't control.
Well, I'm thinking not even in terms of being a star. I'm thinking in terms of
humanitarian.
I get the sense there's for Keanu that there's something he understands about reality that maybe the rest of us don't. And I know that sounds really weird. Is
that the Matrix talking? Is he the Matrix?
No, it's not a Matrix thing. That's one of my least favorites of his films. Yeah. But like, there's just something about life that I feel. I almost get the impression he gets, and I don't know why I get that about him. I don't know that much about him, to be honest. But like, yeah,
he seems like a kind, genuine person.
Yeah.
That people can relate to. People, you know, relate to his story. And that's what makes them want to watch him.
I think it's rooted in kindness and this understanding that of kindness as a currency, or maybe that there's something to kindness that other people don't recognize.
Kindness is currency.
Yeah,
I like that.
I don't know
if you've ever heard that.
Well, if I ever get my metrics up on this, maybe I can get him on here. What is it about you, Keanu Reeves?
Yeah. He's like, kindness is currency. That is good. I like that. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's just it's a funny business. It's a great business. Sad. I mean, there's so many. If you want the roller coaster, step in.
Right? Yes, acting.
So yeah, I think, you know, and let me spin it though. Zach Galifianakis. I think that guy is the best comedian out there. He's one of my favorite guys.
He's good.
Between two firms. Yeah, there's something about him. He's like, you know, I know he hates Hollywood and all this, but he's just like, there's something about his comedic style and his way. He can tell a good story. I think he's really good. You know, it's one of my other favorite actors.
Yeah.
And it's completely different from Tom Cruise, but although Tom Cruise does have the comedy chops too, though. I don't know.
I thought he was great in the one that we were just talking about, Tropic
Thunder. Yeah.
But also that musical he was in, where he played a rock star.
Oh, yeah.
He had a monkey or something.
I think a supporting, won an Oscar, right? Like a supporting.
I forget.
Magnolia, still Magnolias?
Oh, Magnolia is another one. That's not a comedy by any measure.
I don't even know what I'm saying at this point.
He was in a musical where he played a rock star. He had a monkey. And it was a comedy. It was a musical comedy. And he sang in it.
I mean, I will say this. If there's something he needs to do in a part, he will not become good at it. He will be the best.
Yeah.
That's what I tell myself.
I'm
like, tell myself, you know what? If I can just he's going to be the best. I just got to aim for that. And then I'm going to not be good enough, but I'll at least try to make it. Like, that's what people have to realize. You can't just be mediocre or average in any business, anything you do. And go back to the hustle. It's like, you have to shoot for it. You have to know someone. You have to vision. Like, who do you know in your life that has succeeded? And you have to look at that and say, look, you've got to get there.
Yeah. And I feel like there's also an aspect of courage. So
it does take a lot of
Tom Cruise, before he made Magnolia, was a household name. Been in some family-friendly movies, been in some great movies that...
risky business.
A variety of ages, and then Magnolia comes along, and how many A-listers would do a monologue rooted in respect the cock? I mean, that is so risky.
Very small. I mean, you're not going to be like pulling like Daniel Day-Lewis off to do that. You know what I'm saying? When he was still around. Which I also love, Daniel Day-Lewis. He's bad. He's very good.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know. There's something about method that just I can't access it with the same level of respect, because he legit exhausted himself that he can't do it anymore.
And you know that I heard that Will Ferrell does the same thing.
Yeah.
in his kind of roles. He lives like Ron Burgundy. He lived that role.
Did you see his latest one where, like, I don't know if it's his latest one, but we watched it over the pandemic, where he's a singer from Europe in a European contest?
I have not seen that.
It's
No,
on like Netflix or one of those streaming services.
he made a Spanish film one time too. I just happened to randomly find, and I was like, "What? I didn't realize he spoke Spanish. That's something. And I hope I'm not misquoting that, but I think he speaks Spanish. I'm like, some Spanish movie. I'm like, what? It was. I don't know. I think it was on Netflix too. It was a couple years ago, but no, I didn't know about the one he was singing, and that's
Yeah,
news to me.
it was him and Rachel McAdams. You should watch. It's pretty funny. It's they're in the Eurovision music contest, which is the contest. It's a very famous contest over there. It's not so famous over here. It's mostly known over here because ABBA was discovered at Eurovision. The band that Mamma Mia, they did all the Mamma Mia songs.
Yeah.
But
Dude, I'm like far behind on that.
yeah,
I'm like a stone man.
I think it's like the 70s. But him and Rachel McAdams play, like, I think people from Iceland or someplace like
Oh.
that, or the Nether.
That would be
I don't know.
funny.
I don't know those countries, but
Yeah.
one of those countries close to Russia that still believes in elves. But I don't
Speaking
know,
of elves,
it was
he
a
was also
really weird
great in
movie.
He was
Yeah, he
great
was
in Elf
elf.
too.
Yeah, I have
God,
elf
man.
somewhere over here. I
But,
remember
a
when they
guy
were
like
filming
that,
that.
man. This is what I heard too. And I don't know if it's true. They started off his. I mean, he went to like a community college and took some comedy class or public speaking, and he would try out his stuff there and kind of went from that point. I'm like, man, you know what? This lets you know you can be anywhere in the U.S. and every community college, because I went to one. I know this, and then I went to university after that. I took public speaking at a community college. Everyone has one, right? So if you want to get into this, why not start there? Public speaking, right? And I thought of that. It resonated with me when I heard that. Like, you know what? That we all start at that point.
When I was going to school in my undergrad, I went into a public speaking class because I was the leader of the Writers and Speakers Club, and I needed people. And I wanted to pitch them. And so I went into the class, gave them my pitch, and I kept looking over at this guy in the class. And I'm like, is this guy familiar?
He's like,
Why is he so familiar? And it turned out to be an actor named Jason Andrews. And I recognized him from a movie that won Sundance. It was an obscure movie that won Sundance in the mid-90s called Rhythm Thief, that most people in my network do not know.
No.
It's an obscure movie, but an excellent movie. And
Rhythm Thief.
For some fucking reason, I recognized him. And he doesn't look the way he looked in the film. But there was something about him. And at the end, I looked at him. I go, "Are you Jason Andrews from Rhythm Thief?" And he goes, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, okay." And then I left. And it was the weird. So even these guys who have been around the block are taking public speaking classes still.
I think that's where you start. Like, you know what? If anyone's watching this and wants to get in the business as an actor or whatever, public speaking. Let's just recommend that right now. Public speaking
101
at a community college, right? So no pressure. You go in there, you take the class, and you start there. And you can try your bits. You can do whatever because you have certain levels you got to do or demonstration. But you can try. You can start right there.
You know what class I found enormously helpful? It was called Performing Literature. You take
like the spoken
works of literature, like a novel, and you perform it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You're reading it, but you're performing it as you read it. That was hard, man.
Yeah, no, sure. I'm like, what? Yeah. I'm sure that had to be good.
Because it's not designed, none of it's designed to be monologue-ish or dialogue.
Because you have to give it a certain amount of rhythm, right?
Yeah.
Give it a certain amount of rhythm and beats and make it interesting. And you have to create your story within the text.
But you know what happened out of that is I ended up taking the last page of The Great Gatsby and I turned it into a monologue. And it was never really meant to be.
No. Wow.
So I've still got it memorized. Where I did my undergrad, you could do a community college route or you could get the BA. It didn't really matter. So the associates, I think, is the community college, and then the BA.
It is, yeah. I did like a year and a half of community college and then transferred in after that.
But we were getting so many working actors, people who've been around for a long time, a lot of Broadway people. Like, hell, were you in, I remember at one point I was writing for the paper, and it was called The Student Connection, and I had to interview this woman who was winning some sort of scholarship. And I'd recognized her. And I'm like, were you in Aida in 2004?
Wow.
And she's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, I went to one of your shows.
And then you walked away.
Yeah, because I don't really care about famous people. No, I did. I finished the interview and I left, and I never saw her again. No, but like, it's stuff like that. Like,
that's respectable. That's doing your work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're working. That's all they're doing, and that's all they're ever doing, but there's always working actors. The ones who are working and still working are also going back to school for other things. She wasn't going back to school for acting. I think she was actually doing writing, which is like the one thing everybody should be working on is their
Robert
writing.
Downey Jr. number 1, writing.
Fucking A, dude.
Number 2, directing. He's like, you know what? In acting, give me 3 days, I'll make you a star.
That's why I didn't make a film for
the.
I did this accelerated undergrad. So in 3 years, because I did full loads during summers, I did my undergrad in 3 years. But I didn't do any films. I didn't shoot video. I had film professors begging me to take their classes because they knew I'd get A's. I said, no, I'm not here for that. I'm here to work on my writing. I ended up doing only writing and literary courses, philosophy courses. I did heavy mathematics because I sucked. I couldn't even calculate tip. I was bad at math, the main education system. They undid a lot of damage in that regard. Yeah. Like, I'm pretty damn good at it now.
Yeah.
I stayed away from film deliberately to focus on writing and literature, and
that's what you do.
It helped enormously. I mean, my films changed for the better, in my opinion. They changed for the better when I went back to it afterward.
I mean, I hear this all the time from agents and casting directors. If you want to be a good actor, write. Yeah. Understand. Learn.
Because if you can understand, like, if you're given a terrible scene, which I'll probably be the one to give you, because I write quick and I don't edit, but if you're given a terrible scene and you can immediately understand what's wrong with it, you'll immediately be able to improve upon it without having the writers or directors realize what you did. Yeah. It'll just work.
Yeah.
And then when they give that scene to someone else who doesn't know what to do with it, they're going to do what? Okay, so I went to the Vancouver Film School, which is a shithole of a school to go to. And I remember rooming with one of the acting students there. They were taking the acting program. I was taking the film foundation program.
Sure.
And his first day, they said that if a scene's not working, it's because it's written badly and you should just blame the screenwriter. That was their day one lesson.
That's a terrible advice.
Terrible advice. I don't see a lot of actors from that school making it anyway.
I'm going to say it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You're not going to make it.
But if you can learn to write and learn what's wrong with that scene, you don't necessarily need to change the scene. You just will know how to reinterpret it so that it does work, at the very least.
Great actors make all dialogue work to a certain degree. I'm not saying it's 100% foolproof, but you can get close, right? 80-90% of the time, you can make it work if you understand what's going on.
And that's why it's important to get your writing, down.
Yeah. Be a writer. Writing first, understand why this character is saying this to another character, what's the intention, what's the overall objective. Just knowing small things will make you understand, relate yourself as a good actor. Like you become a good actor by understanding writing.
I'll occasionally meet these actors in New York. Usually in the context of going to film festivals, I'll meet actors who they're always taking acting classes. They're always in some sort of acting workshop.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll ask them, like, have you considered taking classes in anything other than this? Because it seems like you are always taking acting workshops.
I'm in a 2-year program.
And
No
yeah, that's
way.
the thing is they no. The answer is always no. They start with one person and then they finish that person's course. Then they'll go to Ripley Greer, rip down the pamphlet to the next one, call the guy up and schedule their next. And it was always at different acting techniques, which is,
Yeah.
I guess it's fine, but they're not mixing it up. And they should absolutely be mixing it up with writing at the very least and
Yeah.
other craft too. I'm
Because
an advocate for multimedia art
it's
knowledge.
very difficult to find two writers that are the same.
Yeah.
It's almost extremely impossible. So if you can't interpret, you've lost a lot.
And one thing I've realized from being in this and being at film festivals, it's about making people remember who you are.
Yeah.
It's about
That's
getting
it.
people to remember you when things come up. Oh, what about that guy we met on that other show?
Yeah.
That'd be perfect for that. And if you don't take the initiative to if you don't take that route, you're always going to be disappointed by, well, not you because
Right.
you're
Yeah.
well-rounded mentally, but other people are going to be disappointed by the fact that you got cut from this show or that movie or whatever.
I mean, it happens. You go there, you know your lines, you do your work, you're prepared, you network, you have fun, and that's it. You go to your next job. And whatever else happens, happens.
Yeah. Whatever else happens, happens.
That's it. That's really the business, right? You only control, you're there, you can't control it. You're not the editor. You're not going to do anything else. You do your job, do the best you can do, and that's it.
You can control, you absolutely can control whether or not the right people remember you and how they remember
Yeah.
you.
True.
Anyway, that's our show for today. Thanks, Tracy.
Man, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I'll see you next time, and we'll be give an update on the next project eventually.
Yeah, well, we're gonna do a project.
Yeah.
We're gonna develop it over the holidays, and then we're
Definitely.
gonna social media the shit out of it while we're doing it,
Right.
and
Pump, pump, pump.
hustle.
Yep. Hustle. Number one rule. Can't knock the hustle. Not sure who came up with that, but I like it.
Have a good night.
All right, buddy. See you, man. Thank
Yeah.
you.